We've all been there. That moment where the person across from you says those magic words, "Do you trust me?" We're going to talk about it on today's podcast. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson. I'm a ballroom dance professional, a life coach, and a peak performance expert. I'm part of a group of motivated people who are dedicated to attaining emotional mastery and unlocking our full potential. We've realized life is a dance. The ups and downs can spin you out of your mind, but it's time to take back control. It's time to become a lifer. We don't believe others are responsible for how we feel. In fact, we don't believe anyone can make us feel anything. We are a new breed of overachievers. Emotional mastery is our journey, and unlocking our full potential is the key. Welcome to the journey. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life. What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here with the Magic for Life podcast. I'm so glad you joined me today. And like the intro said, we're going to talk about trust. Now, let's take the actual definition that you could look up on Google, and I'll save you the time from having to do it. You have a firm belief in the reality, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. If you look at that's the noun version, and then you have the verb, which is believe in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of. And trust is interesting. We've all had our own experiences with trust, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And the type of trust that I'd like to address today, and honestly there's a ton, is just the straight up trust of one's self. Not necessarily other people, because in many instances, you may have noticed that you don't trust yourself. So somebody says, "Hey, would you do this for me?" And you think to yourself, "Gosh, I don't trust myself to get that done." And it's interesting. It's one thing not to trust somebody else, but it's a whole other situation when you don't trust yourself. There's a lack of belief there. And the interesting thing about trust, right, if we look at trust, it has several forms, right? And so if we look at this again, we go back to some of the scientific research that's out there that you could look up. It's pretty straightforward. You know, you look at a guy, there's been a lot of scientists that have studied it and done research on it. And while I don't want to go too much into the scientific side. I'd like to go more into the practical side. I do believe that it's important to give credit to the people that have done the research. So back in 1980, Robert Plutchik, I think I say that or said that wrong probably. It's Plutchik, right? Plutchik. I always mess that up. Anyway, he did a lot of research on the basic emotions, and a lot of people have actually. In fact, nowadays you get anything from there's 6 basic emotions to the new studies that are out that say there are 27 basic emotions. Well, rather than get into semantics about how many emotions there are, I'd just like to talk about the words that we've defined and that we've given definition to. And that's why we started off with joy last time. We're covering trust this time. And we'll just kind of go through each of these definitions of words. Now, here's the thing. Each of these emotional states could mean something different to you. So while I'm talking about a definition that has been given to these, it's because there's been a lot of research done on them and a lot of similarity. However, you feel trust the way that you feel trust. And there is not a single other person on this planet that feels trust in the same way as you. But what happens is we tend to combine and we go, oh yeah, you call that trust, I call that trust too. And so we tend to get similar beliefs about what the word trust means. And so while we can have something similar as to somebody that we know or to the people that we associate with, trust to you may be something very individual and unique. And so keep that in mind. With each of these emotions, they all have a very similar feel because each of your experiences that you've had in your world and in your life build up to mean what trust is. And along the way, you've created your own definition and your own meaning. So while I'm giving you some of the definitions that have been studied and that you can look up on Google, or in any dictionary for that matter, it's important to remember that your definition is really the one that matters the most. And so don't forget that. It really indeed does matter the most. Your definition only, though. And how you feel trust is literally how you feel trust. And at times, you may experience with any emotion, not just trust, but any of the ones that you feel, you might experience that you're feeling it and you might associate with somebody, maybe a best friend, and then all of a sudden you find out that their definition of that emotion might be slightly different than yours, and all of a sudden there's a disconnect. Or you might find as you continue to move forward that your definitions of some of the emotional states that you're in get more and more similar to somebody that you know. In fact, oftentimes somebody that we fall in love with or somebody that we have that type of relationship with, you might find that their definitions of their emotional states may match or may be similar to yours. And for those few that aren't the same or aren't similar to yours, you may feel a disconnect there. Now, when we talk about trust, there are several forms of trust, including willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another person and a reasonable belief that the person offering the trust or that person that is giving that trust to somebody else will behave in a certain way that will benefit that person that's giving the trust. Now, I know that sounds confusing, but as you've gone through your life, whether you're young or whether you've had a few years behind you, you have maybe learned to trust that certain things happen. You can trust that your parents will act a certain way, one way or the other. And when they change that up, it usually is surprising. Or you can trust that your boss will act a certain way or not a certain way. You can trust that the person you maybe love will act or react in a certain way. And in those moments when they don't, that's usually when you're most surprised. And so if we kick back to what we started with, which is trusting yourself. Now, this is interesting, but oftentimes one of the things that gets us the most angry at ourselves is when we all of a sudden feel like we can't trust ourselves. And that's such a weird thing to talk about, right? You think, well, I know me, but then all of a sudden I acted or responded in such a way that was not consistent with how I usually do. And that usually brings up some fear or worry that maybe we aren't who we think we are. And that's a little crazy, right? So we learn to trust ourselves and or not trust ourselves in certain situations. Trust is a very interesting thing. And as you deal with learning that emotion, that feeling of being trustworthy, of trusting other people, of trusting yourself, you can gain a lot out of being able to manage and control this emotion. And so I'd love to hear back from you. I'd love to hear some situations where you have felt that you could trust somebody and why, or that you could trust yourself and why, or maybe even on the other side of it, maybe you can't trust yourself and you maybe have some experiences why. I'd love to hear about it. Send them to me at info@magicforlife.com. I'd love to hear about your experience with the emotion of trust. And so I hope this helps clear up this idea of trust. But the idea here is that there are tons of emotions. We're going to talk about a bunch of them, little bits at a time, and go through and discuss them, because sometimes I think it helps to hear about the emotion. So let's talk some more about these emotions. You know, like they said that in the definitions you can look up on Google, there are 6 basic emotions or 27 basic emotions. But honestly, I like the definition I read, and not necessarily a definition, but a description of the fact that there are an infinite number of emotions. Because if you could imagine them, I like to talk about emotions as crayons. And if you think about colors in the world, there are just millions of colors, little variations, little different changes, and there are lots of those changes that some people can't see. Some people are colorblind. Some people have a hard time seeing one color as opposed to another. But as you look at colors, you have a huge spectrum of colors. I believe that's the same for emotions. So even if we could narrow it down to the basic emotions, the basic crayons, there's still others that you can create. There are other experiences that are hard to classify as a single emotion. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we dumb it down and just go, okay, well, I feel closest to this. But really in your own mind, you have a very unique experience. And that is one of the beautiful things of being human and living in this modern day world of intelligence and education, is that we can learn different emotions and we can experience different emotions being here and alive that might be mixes of the different colors or of the different emotions. And so to you, an emotion may be a mix of some of those basic emotions, and that part is really cool. So I'd love to hear about trust. Send me some emails if you'd like. I'd love to hear some of your experiences. But hopefully this was cool for you, and we'll keep talking about different emotions as we go through the podcast. I'd love to hear some feedback from you about trust. And you can always check out some of the emotion wheels that are out there. There's lots of different versions and lots of different words for different feelings, and that's because that's what we're here for. We're here to experience. We're here to feel. We're here to have the experience of each of these emotional states, not just one or two, and yet so many people only live with maybe 5 or 6. But there are so many beautiful emotions to experience. So we'll see you on the next podcast, and thanks for joining me today. Take care. Bye-bye. Happiness is a choice. Sadness is a choice. All emotions are a choice. Sometimes doing our emotions doesn't seem like it's our choice, but it is. You have control. You are the captain of your ship, and you must learn how to be the best captain you can be. Let me show you how. Pick up your free copy of my new book, Every Minute, at everyminutebook.com.